Reverend Langeni, can you talk about supporting families of LGBTQ plus individuals? Youth ministry really is family ministry, and sometimes it takes adults longer to catch up to where the youth are, if we're being honest about it. So, what can support for families look like as everyone goes on this journey of space making together?
Yeah, this is definitely like the biggest question, and I would say the most important question, right? As we're engaging seriously, the youth in our midst. And one that, I hope we will ask, of the community as well. Uh, one short thing that I like to try to remember to ask, is like, how can I support you? That's such a big question again that often it takes a few tries to ask. Like, so if you're asking a youth person in your midst, right, how can I support you? What feels like support? It often takes a few tries because like people don't actually ask that question of people, so we call ourselves supporters and allies and all sorts of things, right? But then we end up spending all of our time showing off our badges of what great supporters we are, right? That we
Yeah.
forget that, support for one trans youth is not the same kind of support for another trans youth. For one trans youth, for example, it might be support is to correct people immediately what my pronouns are, or names or whatever else that may be. And for another trans youth, it might be, please only call me this name when it's just us, but don't use that name when we're outside of these walls, right? And so that again like ties very much into like some like the family dynamics that are happening when they're not in our organizations and whatnot, right? Where they name use and pronouns and like their explorations of sexuality or whatever that may be. And so really it is to, I would say again, when you're in a space with them and cultivating, having check-ins, I like to do high-low check-ins with folk whenever we meet, right? Where it's like, what's a high we can help you celebrate, what's a low that we can kind of help hold space for today. And it goes from like some really just chill things like, man, I found a really great parking space, to you know today my dad called me by the name that I wanted him to call me, right? And then even having some lows, so you get a sense for like, okay, what are the dynamics that are happening in their families, so now, so not only are you like listening differently to like what support may be needed, you're also now creating a community of support that these youth are learning to like listen differently to each other and support each other in different ways. Because what I've also found is like, I don't have to say much in those spaces because the youth are like, oh my gosh, that happened to me last week, or yeah, a year ago when this happened. And all of a sudden they're giving them tips about, how do you still live into the fullness of who you are when your family's not supportive, right? So like little things like, how to wear certain thing, or, like not like a full switch of outfits or whatever, but like different ways that they could still be held and seen as fully whole, even when their family's not ready to do so, or even just creating a space where it's like, look, it's really crappy right now. And, I get that you're not feeling supported. This is not going to always be true. And while you're here, we see you, we support you. And whatever name you want us to use, whatever, what I'm saying? Like whatever feels like support to you, we want to try to do that, right? Um, not to overpromise, obviously, but just saying like, at a minimum, we want to hear what matters to you, why it matters, and then we're gonna do what we can to be supportive in that manner. And then, so then working with the families, right? I mean, again, I think this is about culture shifting, where it's like, how, what are the sermons coming from the pulpit? What are the books in the library? What is the language in the liturgy? Is it just brothers and sisters, or does it say brothers, sisters, and siblings? Like just different subtle ways that we can like communicate our okayness with the various kinds of like again, not just trans youth, but like really all people. Ultimately, if we can learn how to listen and support and respect each other at a core, then that allows us, right, to do that for our youth, and eventually, hopefully, sooner than later, their families, so that these families are not unintentionally you know harming their children. um and yeah, I mean, again, like then just with youth guiding the way, whether that's I've had conversations with some youth people's counselors, therapists. I've had conversations with their teachers at their invitation, right? Even their parents sometimes, like, look, can you help me come out? Like, so whatever that may be, I'm saying, like, just being a presence that is not judgmental to the youth, and then also to kind of hold that space when or so I've had some parents come in like, I think this is happening with my youth and I'm not sure what to do. And I'm like, pull them aside and ask them. It may be your question that allows them, like, oh, I didn't know what you're, what I'm saying, like, where they're hiding it because they don't know where you are.
Yeah.
And if like, then how might you be able to approach it? So I guess from any angle, right? How do we be supportive of our youth. And I would definitely start with like, what is it that the youth think they need, or or what are the places that they're struggling the most, and then we can kind of bring, offer possibilities to help them get through those like really intense struggle moments.
Thank you.